Good evening and welcome to Politics Today on Channels Television. I'm Olumide Macaulay, sitting in for your regular host, Shewa Kimbaloye. Here are some of the highlights of today's program. Massive crowds joined the governor and deputy governor of Edo State on a thank you rally in Benin City. APC governorship candidate Yamu says he is still studying the result and will make his next step known. And President Muhammadu Buhari sues for peace in Kaduna, asks Southern Kaduna people to live together as one. Again, welcome to Politics Today. And the massive crowds joined the governor and the deputy governor of Edo State on a thank you rally in Benin City. Governorship candidate Yamu says he's still studying the result and will make his next step known.
Your message. We have heard you loud and clear. We will now go back to the office and start to do the work which you have sent us to do for you. Before I leave, I want to thank every resident who lives in Edo State. The Yoruba who are here, the Igbos, the Hausas, the Gadas, the Jaws, the Robos, the Sokotos, all of you came out on Saturday and you spoke and we heard you. And by the grace of God, the next 4 years in Edo State will be years that we will all remember in our lives. PDP!
It's not only in Edo State that the victory of Governor Godwin Obaseki at the just concluded Edo governorship election was celebrated. In the neighboring state of Delta, PDP supporters also hit the streets for the victory rally. Here are some of the highlights.
Have placed their knee on our neck. And what happened in what we are celebrating here today is not just politics. We are celebrating liberation. For far too long, some of these individuals have placed their knee on our neck. And what happened in Edo State is a very, very tactical removal of that knee on our neck. Our people have been able to demonstrate through the Edo State voter that it is possible to celebrate good governance. Obaseki has given the good people of Edo State good governance in line with what we are doing in Delta. And my boss, Senator Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa, alongside other well-meaning leaders of the PDP, like Nyesom Wike of Rivers and a host of others, have been able to show that once you have been able to demonstrate good governance, you will always get the support of your people. And once you get the support of your people, that is what democracy is all about. We must also appreciate President Muhammadu Buhari for not falling into the antics of those who wanted him to put a hand and thwart the will of the people. The celebration today may be open here, but this euphoria also persists in the minds of most Nigerians across the 36 states of the Federation.
There is a saying, if you show me your friends, I will tell you who you are. You notice that Governor Obaseki went to every ward in Edo State to campaign. That is what the Delta State Governor, Senator Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa, is known for. And it takes a Democrat, it takes a politician that understands the people to be able to go from ward to campaign. You can't go to war for campaign when you are the enemy of the people. You can only go for war campaign if you have something to show. And Senator Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa has always done that, even as a senator, through to today. And you saw that was what Obaseki did that gave the victory. The time of election rigging is over. Deltans and Nigerians indeed are now wiser. They want their leaders to be accountable to them. Obaseki was accountable to the people. And you saw the votes kept coming. Even in the opponent's APC supposedly stronghold, the foundation place of Izayamu, PDP won there.
Now, in the meantime, the candidate of the All Progressives Congress in the just concluded Edo governorship election, Pastor Izayamu, says he's still studying the results along with other party members and will make a decision on his next line of action after deliberation. A post on his Twitter handle reads, "I thank and appreciate my supporters who had to endure many evils, including being prevented from voting, for their support and determination during the election. I assure you that I'm studying the results along with other party members and will announce my next move soon." Nowadays, we're going to speak to our guests now. As we continue on the program, we're going to be speaking to a retired Assistant Inspector General of Police, Austin Iwa, as well as Mr. Clement Nwako, convener of the Election Situation Room. And now to Abuja, we're speaking to the retired Assistant Inspector General of Police, Austin Iwa. Thank you for speaking to us on Politics Today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, 30,000 policemen were deployed during the Edo elections. This is aside from the other security operatives. Do you think this number was one too many?
30,000 policemen deployed for this election. I don't think that number was too many. I mean, when you consider the threat and risk assessment that had been conducted by the police before deciding on the number of persons to deploy to the state. And so, and we have seen the result that the number of persons deployed to the state performed creditably, even much more above previous elections.
Security is an integral part of the elections. Looking at the Edo template, do you think this can be replicated, for instance, in Ondo, where elections will soon be coming up, and other elections? Do you think it should be replicated?
Absolutely. I think it should be replicated. One of the good things we have seen in the run-up to this election is that weeks before the election in Edo State, the police deployed a team of threat assessment experts that were there to identify the type of threats, the nature of the threats, the targets of the threats, and deal with the situation before even the election day. I recall that in one of your programs here, the Commissioner of Police, Edo State, did say that several number of persons had been arrested that planning to disrupt the elections and were already charged to court. That is an indication that the pre-election policing was very effective, and we all see the results it is. So this template, I think, should be replicated in the next election in Ondo State.
Therefore, can you give us your own general assessment, your overall view of security-wise of how the Edo elections went?
Well, if I was to give in terms of percentages, I'll give the police about 90%, if not more. But looking at what happened, and from newspaper reports and from reports of election assessment experts that were there, I can confidently say that the police did a marvelously good job. Now, if you look at Clean Foundation assessment report, they will tell you how the police perform in every polling station. And what we get from them is that in about 78% of the polling stations, according to Clean Foundation, the stations were secured and safety. And there are other parameters. For example, they said in 98% of the polling stations, the police officers were approachable by voters and other citizens and other people, as well as other observers to this thing. So I am, as a former police officer, I'm very proud of what the institution has done. And I believe that we are still learning. It's a learning process. If you notice very well, you will see that in every election, there has been some level of improvement of the security officer performance.
Now, the police were there, but they were not there alone. You're giving them a huge pass mark. Let's talk about interagency cooperation. We know that there can be friction between security agencies at times such as these. How can this be properly handled going forward, as far as sharing of information, etc.?
I think this time around, just like in previous other elections, we've had a robust interagency collaboration. I know that the police had a joint operations center where personnel from other security agencies came together to look at the threats, to look at the mitigating factors, and to look at other areas of security that was necessary. In this case, there was absolute cooperation. Well, even though I'm giving police 98% or 99% of their performance, but in all, that has to do with all the security agencies, because this time around we saw a very inclusive cooperation with all the agencies.
In spite of that inclusive cooperation, there were reports of violence in some incidents. For instance, we heard of the Inec officer that was allegedly shot. He was some bodily harm was done to him. How come that escaped them?
Well, you know that the police or the security agencies are not clairvoyant. So it's difficult to look into the future, but we can use current situations to predict the future. There is no election that is perfect anywhere in the world. So you are bound to have such incident happening spontaneously in some of the polling stations and polling areas. But the assessment we have is that it's unfortunate that we lost somebody. But the assessment we have is that at least security was provided. The level of security provided was in the excess of 90%.
We've been speaking before the break with retired former Assistant Inspector General of Police, Austin Iwa, to talk on the elections. And we're also going to be joined by the convener election situation room, Clement Nwakwo, who will be joining us via Skype in Abuja. You're welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you.
Can you give us, firstly, as we begin, your general assessment of the Edo governorship elections?
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me to speak. We did have observers across the state, and observers were there before the elections, on election day, and certainly even before the election materials began to be distributed. Of course, the elections was happening against a background of apprehension of violence. Thankfully, the elections went quite well. And on election day, we did see from the report we received from our observers that there were some slight delays and hitches at the beginning of the elections. But as soon as officials were mobilized and were accompanied by security personnel to different polling units, things began to move on quite quickly. And in most polling units, of course, we did see that polling completed quite early. Collation of results was quite swift, and we did see that Inec had improved significantly with election conduct process. So I think that overall, we thought that the election process went well. The police that were deployed for the elections seemed very professional. Again, there was always concern, and we did see the security challenges with the two previous governorship elections that held right after the general elections of 2019. But with this election, there was a lot more professionalism on the part of the security personnel, and we were all quite pleased that the apprehensions that everyone had about violence, about interference in the election process, were all fizzled out. And so overall, I think the election process went quite well, and we must commend Inec, we must commend the police personnel that conducted elections. And I think for all of us, we think that there is some light in this tunnel, and hopefully we take this forward and build on it to improve our elections generally. But overall, we thought it was a well-run process.
Now, in addition to that, are there any other decisions that should have been taken or things that could be done, that could have been done during the Edo governorship elections that could have made the outcome, as far as the process is concerned, even better?
Well, thank you. You mentioned the process, because that's really our focus, not necessarily the result or the outcome of the elections. INEC did talk about the viewing portal, which it put on for the first time in a larger election. We did see a bit of that in the state's constituency elections in Nasarawa State, but on this scale, this would be the first time it would be publicly available. It was available for a limited time, and I think there was some concern when it wasn't open to the public. But the viewing portal is a major introduction, and we hope that it becomes part of the feature of our elections. We also think that it is also, given that this was a COVID period, and this would be one of the first elections conducted anywhere in the world under this circumstance, that the Electoral Commission did quite well. There were challenges, of course, with the health protocols not being respected by voters, even in some cases by INEC officials who did not insist that people wear masks ahead of voting. We did see voters exchanging masks within the vicinity of polling units. This is completely unacceptable. There are health issues at this time. The COVID pandemic is dangerously around still, and we think that Nigerians need to be very aware of this and continue to protect themselves.
Now, let's consider the role of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC itself. Are you satisfied with the conduct of INEC during the elections?
Well, overall, I mean, there were challenges, of course. There were still instances, not on a large scale, of smart card reader malfunction, although efforts were made to fix some of those problems. So it's understandable that there would be one or two such incidents, and there were some of this. We think that the entirety of presenting transparency in the election still needs to be well rooted and well grounded, so that people are convinced about a process. Overall, again, I would say that the process went smoothly, but there is still a lot of work to be done, and the Electoral Commission needs to be aware of this. There were issues of vote buying. Of course, INEC had very little resources to police this, which brings us to the question and the advocacy that we have mounted over a long time, that there is the need for an Electoral Offences Commission to be present, to be able to monitor and apprehend some of these electoral offences and prosecute them. So those are gaps that remain in the electoral process. In addition, of course, to the fact that there have been, and this is going forward now, there have been provisions and requests by Nigerians for Electoral Act reform, and hope is that the Electoral Act will be comprehensively reformed by the National Assembly, and a new act that incorporates several of the changes that observers at INEC and indeed election stakeholders have talked about is put in place.
Now, the Edo elections are next. What lessons that are learned from the Edo elections can be carried forward to the Ondo elections and replicated and possibly avoided in cases of mistakes that were made? What could we learn from this election that can be replicated in the future elections, especially Ondo?
I think that going forward, it is important that institutions of states be kept away from elections. INEC should be allowed the operational independence to conduct elections. We would say that on the overall, this happened in Edo. We expect that there would be no state interventions in future elections in this country, Ondo as well, as that comes on. There are lessons to be taken from some of the lapses with the observation of COVID-19 protocols, which was not very evident in the elections in Ondo, in Edo, that this does not repeat in Ondo. There are challenges with vote buying, again, to say that, and it's important that we do have a mechanism for apprehending people. There were issues related to late commencement of polls, not significant, but at least it needs to be eliminated. Once we indicate in INEC processes that voting and elections should start at 8:30 a.m., this needs to be observed. There were instances where
Okay, stay with us, Mr. Wankwo. We're going to turn to Mr. Austin Iwa to ask him the same question. Thank you for standing by. We're asking you the same question again. What can we learn from the Edo elections that should be replicated in the Ondo State governorship elections, and what can possibly be done better?
I think in terms of provision of security, the early preparation is one of the things we can take forward to the Ondo election. In this case, in the Edo election, police had started preparation almost 5 months before the election took place, and had put in place a very robust security assessment on ground. We expect that this should be taken forward to Ondo and subsequent elections. In addition to that, police preparation itself, in terms of providing security for their personnel and also welfare for their personnel, is something that should be taken forward, because this was done. All the police personnel that took part in this election were adequately kitted, given enough materials and also their welfare and allowances to take forward.
Okay, Mr.
Contribution to this process is that.
Can you give us, as part of your contribution, can you give us your closing thoughts because of the time? Can you give us your closing thoughts on the general assessment
my closing remarks,
in 30 seconds?
My closing remarks is that the police itself should set up a threat assessment team that will be assessing the performance of the police in future elections, and not rely only on other observers giving them that assessment.
Thank you so much for your time and coming on Politics Today. And now we're going to be joining Mr. Clement Nwako, who's going to be giving us his closing remarks as far as this elections are concerned. Mr. Nwako, it's been quite a process, and now we have a new governor. Well, the governor was re-elected in Edo State. What are your closing remarks on this issue in 30 seconds?
Well, I'm talking more about the process. I think that elections have happened in Edo. Nigerians see some light that there is a possibility that elections can be well conducted in Nigeria entirely. And we're calling on INEC to improve significantly on this as we move towards Ondo, as well towards preparations for the general elections in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clement Nwako, the convener, Election Situation Room. And that's it. That's where we leave it on Politics Today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay.